Hello, I'm Michael Jacobides. This is Donald Gordon, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the London Business School, and we're at LBS, and it's a great pleasure to be hosting a technology columnist for the Financial Times, John Thornhill. John, welcome to LBS, and we'll be speaking about AI ahead of the joint program that LBS is having with the Financial Times on AI and generative AI.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. I spend a lot of my time now writing about AI and whether it's overhyped or underhyped. What's your answer to that question?
Both. I think, first of all, that there is absolutely a huge amount of hype. And I think that the problem with hype is that it does mobilize action, and we see people like Jeff Bezos trying to say, don't worry about the bubble, it's all going to be good. But at the same time, I think that it sows confusion. And what you have is lots of senior executives and board members who think that they need to do something about AI without really having concrete plans. There is an unrealistic expectation. We don't see AI in terms of productivity impact that is real. There is a lot of discussion around it. But at the same time, the technology is advancing at a very quick pace. So there is a hype. There's also a bubble. And I think that the circular investments of companies like NVIDIA and OpenAI are inevitably going to lead to at least some correction. But at the same time, I think that the technology is real. So a bit of both.
And I'm always very intrigued by Amara's law, which says that we tend to overestimate technology in the short run and then underestimate it in the long run. Is that right as well, do you think?
I think that it is, and we can go back to the computers and the way that computers were integrated. Bob Solow in 1997 was complaining that computers are everywhere other than productivity statistics. If you go to the way that the dynamo went into the productive process, it took about 10 years for the time that we realized that what we could do is reorganize the shop floor in order to see the productivity benefits. So it is clear that we need to change things in order to make AI. But I think that it is significantly worse. And it is worse because generative AI in particular is a weird technology where historical precedent can't quite explain it.
In what way weird?
It's weird because it's the first technology that has been funded for no other reason than people's ambition. Usually technology is funded because you expect to see some economic benefit. Now you had an extraordinary amount of funding that was available by people who had made the money in the previous technological revolution, which had to do with an exceptional concentration of power in the big technology firms, and the expectation, which, by the way, is proving to be probably wrong in some of the fundamental economics, that there's going to be a winner-take-all. I don't think that winner-take-all is going to be a technological inevitability. Now, companies involved in that, like OpenAI and Google, are trying to see how they can integrate it in products to create the benefits, but they created the technology that is made for and by, unfortunately, dudes mostly.
I think there is a distinction there, isn't there? I mean, as you're saying, some of the AI research labs are developing purely because they want to develop the technology in its own right, and they haven't quite thought about all the use cases yet. But as you're also saying, there are a lot of big tech companies, most notably kind of Google and Amazon and Facebook, who are using it to kind of amplify, magnify, enrich their existing services and products. And so I think there is a distinction. And as we've seen in the latest results from all of these big tech companies, a lot of them are significantly increasing their productivity. They're shedding a lot of workers at the moment, and they're also increasing their profitability. So I think AI is already generating quite a lot of profit for a certain core number of companies. But it's, as you're saying, it's the interesting part is there's this other subset of AI companies that are just going hell for leather to develop the technology, even if they're not quite sure what their use case is.
Absolutely. The distinction that I'm drawing here is that the technology developed for primarily personal use. If you use it to use patents, you will see that we still use it for our own individual use. I mean, the first use of AI is companionship. The second is meaning of life. And results such these are come because the technology has been developed not to be monetized by corporates. And this is the unusual bit, that there was a remarkable amount of funding. Now, that said, of course, the companies that have already developed webs of influence that are going unchecked because technological power does not sit easily with the current frameworks we have about regulation, want to ensure that they will not lose the dominance they have in terms of economic life. If anything, they want to use it to amplify it and not only ensure that they have a web of influence across industries, but that web of influence becomes bigger and bigger, deeper and deeper as more intelligent work comes integrated to them. But what is interesting for most organizations is that we have a technology that we can relate to at a deep personal level, but that is not made primarily to be integrated. And this is the fun bit of the how do you integrate it? And that's where most of the companies that are saying, I can see it, my children can see it, the younger executives can see it, and the technology can do impressive stuff. How do we make it productive for us? And this is where I see less progress, not in terms of the big tech, where I fully agree with you, but primarily in terms of what it is that we can do to see how organizations can be more productive. So can you see, from your perspective, what is the pulse of organizations? Do you see them being able to do something with it, or do they focus more on trying to impress the press with it?
Well, there are two different areas I think I'd like to talk about. One is, I completely agree with you on the chatbots. We are developing this technology very fast, and it is people playing around with it. And there are some really interesting use cases that are emerging from that. But I think that all of the debate tends to be about generative AI. It all gets conflated with the chatbots. Whereas there are other branches, sub-branches of AI that people have been using for a long time now and are now developing very fast in different ways. And I think that's personally where a lot of the real interest in the use and application of this technology is developing. I've been to a number of talks recently about the application of AI for science and, machine learning technologies applied to scientific research, coming up with hypotheses, testing those hypotheses, using it for materials discovery or drug discovery, or all kinds of different applications in terms of kind of scientific research. Most notably, we saw with Google DeepMind and AlphaFold and protein folding. But I think we're now beginning to see a new generation of companies emerging, a lot of startups emerging, trying to take this AI technology and apply it to particular problems. And I think the fascinating part of that as well is that it's not just about software anymore. This is the interface between software and hardware. You are using AI to try to change the atom economy. And that, I think, is going to be where the AI debate is going to go next in a way. Can people take this AI and use it to do things that were never possible before, come up with new business models that weren't possible before, and make a lot of money out of that?
Well, the research that we've done absolutely supports it. And looking at one of the few more systematic surveys in terms of what directors think in terms of businesses, there is a very significant correlation between those who use it for new business models and their excitement with, in particular, generative AI, as opposed to those who use it for the standard productivity uses, efficiency uses, reducing FTEs here and there, writing emails more effectively, which ends up not really turning the dial, which is interesting because the things that most organizations would immediately focus on doing as a responsible thing is not where most of the economic benefit is, which then takes us to what are the skills that are required to turn this technology, integrate it with the organization, and then see what happens. One of the things that you picked up on is the fact that we're seeing some activity in terms of new firms. And this is another thing that we've observed, which is that there is a much greater license to change when you start something afresh. Even if it is a new country or a new division, an existing corporate, primarily it is when there is a new entity that says, let me take this technology and let me reimagine a process from the get-go. And it is these organizations that are able to really take advantage of the technological opportunities. Does this mean that existing firms find themselves challenged, and are we going to an old-style Schumpeterian story whereby we will see not only competition that draws on technology, but also different types of organizations challenged, partly because it might not be in the DNA of the existing firms to respond?
I think you're quite right. This is going to be one of the really fascinating debates that plays out, I think, isn't it? That you are going to get some established legacy companies, as it were, using AI in incredibly imaginative ways. They've got an enormous number of advantages in terms of they have a big proprietary data pool that they already own. They have access to capital. They have a lot of expertise in the company. They have brand reputation. So they're starting from a very good place. So, you take an insurance company, there's no reason why they couldn't take all of the data that they have and enhance their products and even launch new products off the basis of that. But that said, a lot of companies, as I'm sure you study intensively at the LBS, are pretty resistant to change. They find it hard to innovate. And that creates, I think, an enormous opportunity for startups in this field as well, really to kind of grasp an idea and to run with it. I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation, and we're going to see a very high failure rate amongst those startups, because either they're going to get crushed by the incumbent firms that who eventually get to grips with AI and what it can do and will just obliterate them, or I think we're also seeing, the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, the Googles, and so on themselves are now developing use cases for their technology, which is also going to render a lot of these new generation startups obsolete as well, simply because a company can use the existing, the big company platforms to do what a lot of these startups are attempting to do as well. So I think it's going to be a lot of creative destruction, as you suggest, but I don't think it's as simple as to say the incumbents or the insurgents are going to win. It's going to be some of both.
I agree. I think that it's interesting to think about what drives winners and losers. Just this week, in our Next Generation Digital Strategies program, spoke with the Chief Innovation Officer of Ping An and the CFO of Majid for Time. Ping An is leveraging now AI, but it does so after a very aggressive use of digitization that has been at the core of it and what made it the world's most valuable insurance firm. And it's interesting that a company like that, or currently Majid for Time, is using an AI to say, I will track you when you are in our malls, and I will start giving you advertisement as you move, for instance, in whether it's fresh produce. They just created about 100 million, I think, last quarter from doing what Google or Facebook were doing. So there are companies that are in the traditional physical world taking their digital infrastructure, coupling it with AI, and then combining it to create a new product that would cement their ownership. Now, the challenge, of course, means that there are a few companies that already were there at the right time, and they had the right complementary assets in terms of information, in terms of digitization, and also in terms of culture. The ability of experimenting, of trying things, pulling the plug when they should, and integrating the technology. But this is not the totality. This is a minority, and it may be that, like with the previous version of AI, AI increases the inequality between organizations, small and large. If we are to think about rhyme and reason in terms of what distinguishes winners and losers, you see various organizations of various sorts. What are the themes that emerge that you think make you say, this augurs well, or this spells trouble now that you're facing AI?
Well, you mentioned the word culture, and I think that's going to be the really critical determinant in this. It's that great quote from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I really believe that in this particular field, that you can come up with a strategy about how to apply AI, but that might be obsolete in a year or two because the models have developed in such a way that your initial hunch is going to be proven wrong. Culture, as you're saying, the ability to experiment fast, to iterate, to innovate, and to adopt this in a kind of responsible, safe way. I think that's what's going to distinguish the winners and losers in this race. And how you drive that from the top of an organization, I think is going to be very hard. I think in order to win, the companies are going to have the top leadership buying into this and driving the whole change program. But a lot of the innovation is going to come from the bottom up. You're going to have people who are close to customers or close to the research or the models or the technologists who are coming up with their own ideas about, well, hang on a minute, we could apply this technology in this way, which no one else in the organization has thought about. And it's then how do you run with that and develop as an idea? Does that make sense to you?
Well, not only does it make sense, I think it's a very nice plug for the program that we're trying to build in terms of trying to create a framework that would help provide a guidance, looking at what the actual data is, where unfortunately there's a lot of conflict of interest in terms of the vendors trying to say that all you need is a silver bullet of the technology and everything's going to be fine, which unfortunately is not true. And thinking about what are the actual determinants, which are usually organizational, they have to do with strategic alignment, they have to do with the ability of marshalling the resources and knowing how to deploy and redeploy, and also how to engage with people, because this is a technology that is driving deep fear and as such resistance, with most people saying, am I losing my job? And do I have a reason for existence anymore if technology can do what I do? And in the ventures, I've seen that getting engaged in a couple of them, people are excited because they're like, we're going to be part of the new wave. And in many existing organizations, what I see, both as a researcher as an advisor, is that there is a significant resistance and fear. And if you don't address that head on, you're not going to go anywhere.
And I think that's one of the differences between the incumbents and the insurgents as well, isn't it? Because the incumbents are going to be resistant to change for the reasons you suggest. And in fact, what we're seeing amongst the insurgents, I think, is that when you look at the startups that are being formed now, the AI native startups, and we've done this at Sifted, this media organization that I set up to study European startups, you look at European startups in AI, and they are growing faster than they have ever done before, and they are doing so with less capital and fewer people. They are moving a lot faster than they ever did before. So I think that's also going to intensify the competitive dynamics with the big companies, isn't it?
I'm with you, and you're bringing now in another important dimension, and I think that we sometimes like complaining in Europe, and I still consider the UK part of Europe, perhaps counterintuitively, about where things are. I think that there are interesting developments that might make one a little bit less pessimistic, but still thinking about the geopolitics, because this is another important dimension in what's happening now, because geopolitics has cast a long shadow. We have cloud nationalization, the desire to keep data in-house. There is a balkanization of regulation, and the emerging consensus between regulators in all large countries, unfortunately, after the ascendancy of Trump in the presidency, has gone out of the window, because it is quite clear that this is becoming extremely parochial. So how do you see the geopolitical landscape affecting the daily reality? Not the people who simply care about geopolitics, but the people who need to be running a business.
Well, that is, I think, going to be a really interesting question, isn't it? Because I think in Europe, a lot of people are going to be very concerned about being wholly reliant on US technology. We're already seeing this big movement towards kind of tech sovereignty in Europe. In Britain, we have had a visit by Jensen Huang and NVIDIA and a lot of the other tech bosses who are promising to inject billions and billions of dollars into kind of data center development and so on. But does that make us, I think in the words of Nick Clegg, a vassal state of the US when it comes to technology? Not clear. Then you're also getting the development of China and the extraordinarily rapid development of open weight models in China. We saw that with the arrival of DeepSeek, the distillation techniques they're using to develop different types of models that can be incredibly effective. And I think, as you're alluding to with the case of kind of Pingyang before, a lot of Chinese companies are unbelievably fast at seizing this technology and implementing it. And I think you're going to see a lot of adaptability in that area, and that China is going to lead the world, as it already does in some areas of fintech or e-commerce or robotics. And I think that's where they're going to apply AI very productively. So I think we're going to see further kind of escalation of the competitive tensions geopolitically, and Europe in particular has to figure out what its model is going to be. I think US is going to continue to lead on the frontier technology and the development of the big models. You're going to have China applying this on a mass scale very quickly and experimentally, and Europe has got to figure out how it's going to play in this world.
So what is it that excites you when it comes to current developments in AI that are going to change the landscape?
I think it's all about the stuff we don't actually know about today. I think it's we're still in the very early days of understanding how this technology can be applied. I think the people I find the most interesting to talk to at the moment are the scientists and the technologists in a lot of these frontier labs and in a lot of research organizations who are attempting to use this and are getting very excited about how they can use it in very different ways. I heard a talk the other day by Stephen Wolfram, who is applying AI to scientific research. Extraordinarily interesting how we are developing new hypotheses in maths, how we're applying it to materials, new materials, drug discovery, and so on. So I think we're just at the beginning of figuring out how we can apply it in a really interesting way. And I think that's going to lead to all kinds of new interesting applications and businesses that are going to emerge from this, which leads us on really to people at LBS. What are you thinking about this in terms of educating the next generation of business leaders? How are they going to prepare for the world that I've just described, where we frankly don't know what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time?
Well, I think that it's a parallel thing, because I think that there's already a lot to do with what we know, even before we start with the stuff that we don't know. I think that leaders need to be better prepared in understanding what AI does, how it affects organizations, the way that it redefines strategy, and the way that they need to change their organization and leadership style in order to be effective, even on the basis of where AI is today, and also be ready to engage with the new forces that are coming up. So I think that we're going to be working, including in our program on AI and generative AI, in building part of the structure and the resilience to provide a blueprint, as I think there's a lot of work to adjust both existing organizations and engage with these new firms that are driving change. And on that, let me thank you for a terrific conversation and looking forward to more.
Thank you, Michael.